Now it is my great honor to welcome Professor Bruno Renzi, who is online with us today, specialist in psychiatry, co-director of Maharishi College for Perfect Health International, faculty member of Maharishi International University, distinguished author and leader in Maharishi Ayurveda and integrative medicine in Italy. Professor Renzi will now share online his presentation titled DNA, Temperament and the Existential Project. Please welcome.
Yes, good morning and thank you. First of all, I wish to thank Thomas Feitzer for the kind invitation, and I apologize if I not present, if I offer my presentation not in present, because I have an unexpected problem, family problem, so I couldn't come to Prague. So I will share the screen now, and my topics is DNA, Temperament and Existential Project. It's just a presentation, little different presentation from the president. And I will offer a new perspective of the DNA just using a quantum-physic dimension that is related to morphogenetic fields. And we will have a completely new understanding of the DNA and the factors that are responsible for the expression of the DNA in terms of temperaments and also psychic constitution. In this presentation, I will attempt to address some assumptions and present the new perception of the DNA through wave genetics. Wave genetics is a new field of genetics in which the quantum physics is applied to the biological structure of the DNA. This will help us understand how morphogenetic aspects of the DNA are responsible for the expression of an individual's character and temperament, not just the morphological dimension, and therefore also impact a person's existential project. And I will use a series of tiles to create a more complex picture that will allow us to understand the role of the DNA in determining the expression of temperament and psychic constitution as expressed in Ayurvedic medicine. So I will integrate this knowledge with some concept from Ayurvedic medicine just to understand how this dimension of the DNA can be responsible for the expression in terms of temperamental traits. So the new frontiers of cosmology and knowledge in the physical quantum area are revolutionizing a series of paradigms that have conditioned the perception of the man's position in the cosmos. So with this new perspective, we can ask ourselves some questions, and it is possible that temperament can be determined by a morphogenetic fields at the DNA level. Morphogenetic fields are fields related to the integration of electromagnetic dimension. And is it possible that a dimension of the DNA represents a personal memory? And how is this memory declined in the individual life? Can this type of morphogenetic configuration influence the evolutive flow of the individual? So we will try just to answer to this question, and I will start with some assumptions that are related mainly to the DNA. And initially, it was considered as a rigid structure, polymer, made up of sequence of nucleotides. the sequential arrangement of nucleotides constitute the genetic information. So from the scientific point of view, we know very well all the structure of the genome, but still now we don't know the laws that govern profoundly the expression of the DNA. And this type of information determines the morphological structure of the individual through the gene expression. So the DNA has a plastic structure, we know that, and respond to stimulation and environmental information. And this is through the epigenetics. But we have more assumption when we start to adopt a morphogenetic vision, and we are assuming that there are morphogenetic fields that determine the expression of the DNA. And if we look just more deeply in the structure of the DNA, we know that there is one coding and one non-coding DNA. DNA vehicles and transmit memory in resonance, and we will see what means resonance in this presentation. And so DNA vehicles and transmit memory in resonance with the morphic field and determines not only the morphological structure, but also the complex temperamental constitution. And our DNA allows us to enter in resonance with the phylogenetic memory. It can carry specific memories that guide the perception of the individual in his existential flow. And this is through the karmic memory, through the holographic structure inside these morphogenetic fields. The morphogenetic fields that govern the expression of the DNA carry holographic memories, and these memories have their own plasticity in the sense that they can be allied to the laws of nature. And now we will start with our pieces of our mosaic, and we will start with the term temperament, that is from Latin, temperamentum, that means mixing in the right proportion. It is used to indicate the mixture of the innate aspects of the personality. And according to Jasper, it is believed that the classical authors, Hippocrates and Galeno, consider temperament as the expression of subjective variability in relation to humors, personological traits, somatic habitus, just the constitution, that means, and also the astrological influences. But we will use the concept of mixing in the right proportion from another perspective, that is a quantum-physics perspective, and we will see that there is a mixing of a quantum-physics dimension in our observation, a genetic dimension related to hereditary, a morphogenetic dimension that is connected with the wave genetics, that is this new area of genetics, and epigenetic dimension. And this mixing is responsible for the physical, morphological, and temperamental expression of the DNA. And we can integrate these assumptions with the principle of Ayurvedic medicine, and this is what I will present in this presentation. So you know that physics is revolutionizing, is creating just a new vision in our world, and the most important accepted theory in the expression of matter from quantum physics point of view is the unified field theory. And unified field theory concerned with the expression of the force field and matter fields that are quantum dimension, that are responsible through their integration for the atomic physics and nuclear physics, and then all the different layers in the field of matters. But this is also we can adopt this knowledge, and we have to adopt this knowledge also to our physiology. And we can observe that our organisms are the complexity of our systems, and is just the expression of the unified field that, from the Ayurvedic point of view, is consciousness. And from this dimension, we observe that we have the first expression in terms of force fields and matter fields that then create the integration of this aspect, create the gene structure. And from that dimension, the DNA can express through the RNA the different layers of our physiology. And according to molecular biology, each species follows the structure of its own genes. And molecular biology has made many progress, but many functions attributed to DNA are not understandable in terms of molecular biology. Therefore, a new vision of formative causality that is connected with the existence of morphogenetic fields or electromagnetic dimension inside the DNA is taken into consideration. And this dimension directs the program of the DNA, is responsible for the expression of the DNA, and therefore the differentiation of the forms. So what we normally know about the DNA is that the common idea of the DNA is that we have this structure of double helix that in the constitution, that there is a sequence of nucleotides that structure the genes, and each nucleotide is created by the desoxyribosio phosphate group and nitrogen bases, different nitrogen base. And this is what we know from the biological point of view. And this is the idea that we have just of the DNA, just a double helix. But if we look just more deep in the structure of DNA, in this case, we can observe a three-dimensional reconstruction of a piece of the DNA through this imaging technique that is height control technique, and that is conceptually similar to the nuclear magnetic resonance. And we can see that here the DNA is able to curl up in cells in a fractal globule divided in two portions, one which is transcriptional active and one inactive, spatially distinct from each other. So this is a completely new vision of the DNA, and then we will go more inside in the knowledge of this structure, just to understand how these morphogenetic fields are responsible for the expression of this aspect. And we know that all our physiology is the expression of the 3% of the entire genetic heritage. And there is also a 97% of the DNA that is non-coding. And there are many hypotheses about this 97%, just to understand the meaning, why 97% of the DNA is not coding. And there can be parts of the DNA that have lost coding, value in the course of evolution, or can be a protective function regarding the coding function of the 3% of the DNA, or can have a reserve function for the coding part, or spacer element between genes, or an unknown adjustment function that could control the expression of some genes. And this hypothesis is what we prefer in our just perspective. And then some other hypothesis not coding the RNA and no function. But if we go more inside in the vision of the DNA, we can also ask some other question. And what determines the differentiation of the cells in the different structures and functions starting from a single genetic heritage? Is there something deeper dimension that regulates differentiation? And what determines the peculiar morphological differentiation at the individual level? And what determines the differentiation of cellular structure and functions to generate entire apparatuses and systems that work in perfect synergy? So we will observe deeper the structure of the DNA, and then we will have some answer. The 45% of the DNA is made up of monotonous repetition of the DNA sequences, better known as repeated sequences, with a very interesting evolutionary origin. They are basically pieces of genome of ancestral viruses which co-evolved with our genome. And like viruses, they retain the ability to move. And what is a mobile DNA for? And whether or not it is present next to a gene seems to make a difference in the functionality of the gene itself, but the reason is obscure. And another aspect, it's related to the kinking and twisting of the non-coding DNA for the purpose of information, not only the composition of the nucleotide sequence within the DNA is important, but also the twisting of the sequences and the frequency of twisting. And this is due to the vision that we have with that three-dimensional reconstruction of the DNA as a fractal globule. And it can be, the DNA, it can be compared to a miniature solenoid. A very low bioelectric current that passes through a sequence of twisted biochemical material generates a tiny but effective electromagnetic field. The twisting is variable, and this determines a modulation of the electromagnetic field inside the structure of the DNA. And the minute electromagnetic fields present in the DNA allow the transfer of information and the modulation of communication with the DNA code. And based on the information received, the code responds, acts, transmits, and receives, and therefore can change, reprogram itself. So it's a very important, this electromagnetic dimension that has a specific plasticity, and there are many, there is some that vehicle information that is responsible just for the expression of the DNA. And the mobility of these elements was known to occur in germ lines, particularly in spermatozoa, which partially explain why an individual is not just the sum of the genes of a mother and father. Then it was discovered that they also move in somatic cells, that is in adults, starting with the brain, in particular when they have to adapt to environmental stress. In practice, the mobile elements add to the genome an unexpected degree of dynamic and adaptive variability, which is accompanied by so-called epigenetic modification. Each one records its own experience, biological and cultural, in a physiological way different from another, and the repeated elements contribute to fix this biodiversity. And introducing the concept of formal causality, according to molecular biology, we just told that we are introducing this new aspect, that is formative causality, and formative causality concerned with the existence of the integration of electromagnetic fields inside the DNA, and these fields are known as morphogenetic fields and responsible for the expression of the DNA. And morphogenetic fields are the new type of field preside the formation of an organism and evolve, have a history, and thanks to the morphic resonance mechanism, they have a memory. So through the integration of these electromagnetic fields, we have a holographic reality that vehicle memory or karmic information inside the structure of the DNA. And they are part of a larger family of fields called morphic fields. And we will introduce also this formative causality from the research of the Rupert Sheldrake, that is a molecular biologist. And according to Sheldrake, morphic fields are regions of influence within space and time, localized within and around the system that organizes, in this case, the DNA. Their operation is probabilistic, and they are limited or impose an order to the inherent indeterminism of the system which they preserve, and include and connect the various parts of the system that they are intended to organize. And another concept inside the theory of Sheldrake is the morphic resonance. And morphic resonance identifies the idea according to which each individual belonging to a species draws on the collective memory of the species' morphic field, in this case, contributing in turn to further development of the species itself. Of particular importance in Sheldrake's theory is the concept of morphic resonance. Each complex and organized set of activities of an individual, superior animal or man, which also include dreams, mystical experience, altered state of consciousness, and more, has its own structure. These mental states and these activities can be transferred from one individual to another thanks to the morphic resonance mechanism. So the morphogenetic field, the work of the morphic fields is carried out at the subatomic level, functioning as schematized restriction on the multitude and probable and indeterminate events that occur at the deepest level of the physical systems. So we are in the quantum field dimension, and they are limited or impose an order to an inherent indeterminism of the system which they preserve. And from the sum of this data, it is possible to arrive at a rather new image of the DNA. And if until now this molecule had been seen as an exclusively biochemical information exchanger, and consequently treated as such, for example, in the biomedical field, these researches suggest the possibility of interacting with the DNA in another way. And the last point is of revolutionary importance in the terms of wave genetics. In fact, it allows us to hypothesize that the genetic material of a living organism form a hologram due to the integration of electromagnetic fields, in which each chromosomal unity acts as a biochip which simultaneously emits and receives all the set of information concerning the existence in space and time of that organism, organize them in a text written with letters corresponding to the nucleotide basis. And this text is, of course, dynamic, being formed by a flow of variable exogenous and endogenous information. And to summarize, the quintessence of the wave genome theory can be represented in the following way. The genetic apparatus is considered a quantum biocomputer, which uses a verbal structure of the DNA and RNA and proteins for the management of body. This biocomputer generates acoustic and electromagnetic waves and sounds and light to carry the information used by the biosystem. And now we can have a new vision of the psychic constitution of the man, in which we have this quantum dimension that is related to the undifferentiated consciousness, that is the unified field, that is vacuum, that is at the basis of our reality. And from this dimension, we have the expression of the primordial morphic field that is related to our phylogeny and contain all the basic laws related to our physiology. And then we have the individual morphogenetic dimension that is our personal Jivatma, and phenotype and the individual psychic dimension that is related. All this aspect is a unique hologram relating to the individual life, and from where we have then the individual self, the subconscious dimension, and the egoic dimension. All this knowledge can be associated with the expression of the DNA in terms of sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic psychic constitution in Ayurveda, and this dimension is responsible for the expression of the psychic constitution, and then we have different subtypes of constitution that are sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic. And we can say that this morphic memory is carried in the DNA through this quantum dimension and through the morphic fields, and quantum physics determinants of temperament that condition the individual and group existential flow. These are the morphogenetic fields, and we have other aspects that are related to hereditary, but we can conclude that DNA communicates and receives information from human awareness, whether conscious or unconscious, through the very broad spectrum electromagnetism, as well as interacting with universal energy field. And DNA, therefore, has an electromagnetic nature. And thank you for the listening.
Professor Renzi, thank you very much for your insightful presentation.